Our fellow listeners from the European Union know this annoying moment when you are handed some consent file for your data. You have to sign to basically every little shop, store, online, offline, wherever, and sign that they can process your data. But why in the world is this annoying thing implemented? Is it even any good? Do we need this crap? Or is it just over-regulation by the European Union? Let's find out today when Siobhan Solberg walks us through the GDPR.
All around us, data is constantly gaining more and more relevance in our private lives, our businesses, and our careers. For companies, it is turning from a competitive advantage into a survival factor. Those who do not use their data effectively will perish. It is high time to get a grip on the data chaos. Every other Tuesday on Unfuck Your Data, Christian Krug interviews data professionals about how you can bring order to the chaos, thus making the most of your data for your company, your customers, and, of course, for you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and all other listeners. Welcome back to the probably coolest data podcast from Germany, now brought to you in English. This is Unfuck Your Data, and I'm your host, Christian Krug. And my today's guest has hell of a travel and hell of some languages behind her. And we're only talking about the non-coding languages. She grew up, as I discovered today, also in Germany with 3 languages, being French, English, and German, and now is residing in Athens, Greece. For the first part of her career, she ventured into data and BI with the traditional analytics, dashboarding stuff, and then discovered that there's one issue about data, which is criminally underrated, overlooked, and not covered by many people. So she decided to give it a bit more attention. And we're talking today about data protection and data privacy. And please give a warm welcome to Siobhan Solberg. I hope I pronounced the name almost right. And Siobhan, thanks for coming. And what did I miss out? What else should the listeners know about you?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I didn't miss anything. You missed a lot, but we don't have to get into it. So we can just go for it.
Great. So then let's dive headfirst into the topic. You came from BI. You also have been head of BI, and therefore dealing with a lot of data apparently. But you made the switch to data protection, data privacy. How did that go? And why?
How did that go?
I mean, for me, it's always the boring. For me, that is always the boring stuff that the IT has to take care of.
Yeah, so I guess now it's important that the little part that you missed, it might make more sense out of it all. So yes, I worked my way up through an organization, and eventually to the head of BI, and actually ended up being the CMO of the organization as well. But got sick of working for somebody else and decided to do my own thing. So I left and I started taking on clients, mostly in the measurement and optimization space. But obviously, being what it is, you need to take clients and you need to make money. So I was working mostly in experimentation and optimization because that's what everyone wants, right? They don't want to deal with their data. They want to be optimizing everything.
So just for the domain, so we're talking a lot about marketing data currently and customer facing data. So
exactly.
not the internal accounting stuff, production stuff, more like really the data that is facing our customers.
At this point, yeah. When I was in BI, it was a lot more production stuff, etc. Obviously.
Yeah.
But this is essentially what I was doing then for clients. And at some point I pushed back and I said, you know what, you guys can optimize as much as you want. If your data is a mess and it's not accurate or it's not reliable, your optimization efforts are useless. You can't measure them. So I started focusing a lot more on measurement. And that was around the time the GDPR rolled around. So suddenly everyone's like, well, What do I do with the data? What are we doing with our data? What is the problem with it? So, all the questions come. And that's how I ended up. I'm really curious by nature. So I had to figure out what it was. I was like, GDPR. Okay, let's look into that. And then I read it and it was an incomprehensible mess. And then I read a little bit about it to understand what I was reading. And slowly but surely realized that the essence of it, let me call it the spirit of the GDPR, aligned with what I thought.
Okay. So for all the non-super hardcore data experts out there, let's take a brief step back and say, what is GDPR? And then really say what the spirit of it. I would be interested in that.
So the GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It is essentially a regulation that regulates how you work with personal data in the European Union. Personal data being very vague. So please don't mix it up with PII, especially if you're into analytics.
PII is?
Personally identifiable information. So in, let's say, America or in the analytics community, PII is, pretty standard. PII is personal data, but personal data is a lot broader than PII.
So for the mathematics, it's a part. So PII is a small fraction of GDPR covered data. Okay.
Exactly. That's one way to put it. The spirit of the GDPR. So obviously this is my interpretation and my opinion of it, but especially back then, it just felt like the regulators at the time were trying to get people to act more responsibly with the data of, of the users, essentially, and just be a bit more respectful about how to handle that data. And I agreed with that because I was one of those people working. So the company I worked for way back in the day was a media company, and we were doing a lot of sketchy stuff with that data.
So basically, the companies, probably most people know this from the annoying cookie pop-ups they now have. And all the other annoying pop-ups and shit on websites, which they go through, that they have to, I have to accept that you place a cookie. I have to accept that you save my information. I have to accept this and that and whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to accept for a reason.
Yeah, in essence. Actually, the cookie pop-up is not even the GDPR.
Okay.
So the cookie pop-up is there because of something called the e-privacy regulation, which was there before the GDPR. And to be fair, it doesn't even say that you have to put a cookie pop-up up. The ad tech industry actually came up with that one.
Because they want cookies.
Exactly.
Because they want cookies or better trackers on our devices.
Because ultimately you needed to get consent to put any trackers on. So this was one way to get it. But so I aligned with that whole idea of respecting your user a bit more. And if anybody knows anything about me, that's the one thing I say over and over again, is just respect your fucking user. But, that's apparently harder to do than to say.
Okay.
So I agreed with the spirit of it. But why? Yeah. Why? It's a good question.
Why is it so hard to treat our users / customers with respect?
Well, look, I actually personally don't think it's that hard.
Yeah.
But I think that in a profit-driven society, which is nothing wrong with that, it is very hard when you essentially realize how much more you can get by not respecting the data. And I think that sometimes people get lost when we're working, So, even when I was doing sketchy things with data, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do this, I'll do that. I saw no problem with it. But if someone would have told me I'm doing that with your data, I would have said, oh, no, you're not. Right? So it's a little hypocritical, not just a little, very. But ultimately, that's what it was like. And I know now when I talk to a lot of analysts or marketers, I just say, imagine that you were doing that to your own data. And then if you're cool with that, okay, then at least you're not being a hypocrite, right? But
So then you're being a proper villain.
yeah, come on. If you're a proper villain, you might as well be.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's fine. So,
just stay true to yourself, right? No.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. The GDPR, in its essence, I thought that it was trying to do a good thing at the time. And I went down the rabbit hole and I never came back.
Okay. So maybe make it a bit more tangible for the people out there. So yeah, I got that. The GDPR, data protection guideline, is there to protect our data from abuse by the people we hand them over to. For example, if I hand my address, user data, behavior data over to an app provider, that they treat this data with respect and don't abuse it to make more money out of me with sketchy things or sell it to God knows who.
Yeah. So I want to say yes, but no.
Okay.
Meaning, I think that was the idea behind it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, right, it's a regulation. So it is whatever it says, and then you decide how you're going to abide by it. So I mean, that's the truth.
So we have a discrepancy there between the spirit of the GDPR, what it was intended for, then comes to what was written down is something different, and then how the companies or people implemented to adhere to that regulation is third story.
Exactly. So, and just to be clear, the spirit of it is my reading of it, right? So I think other people can think differently about that. In regards to what's written down, it's what we call a risk-based regulation, and it's got some overall overriding, let's call them principles that you need to abide by. But that means there's a lot of room for interpretation, and that needs to be that way because, as we all know, technology and our landscape changes so quickly. If you were going to make it exact rules and exact definitions, then you'd never keep up with what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of measures in there that you need to take, to determine if something is risky behavior or not. But that is obviously for you to decide as the person processing the data. So, you can say, you're a marketing company and you want all the data. You want the wedding date, the birth date of the baby, your birthday. You want whatever medical conditions you have, whatever it might be.
The gender of their pet.
Exactly. The gender of their pet. Yeah, why not? They want all of it.
Yeah.
No one's saying you can't have it. Number one, if someone gives it to them knowingly and willingly, that's a different story. But what essentially is being asked of them is, why do you need it? What's the purpose for you needing it? And how long are you going to keep that data? And why are you going to keep it that long? And what are you going to do with that data further down the line? You need to think about that now. And then if you're going to sell it to somebody, do you have consent from the person to sell it to somebody? So it's making you think about what you're going to do with that data, which, for the record, for anybody working with data, should be pretty basic best practices, right? Because when we work with data, we shouldn't be just collecting it all and throwing it in there and just letting it simmer. Because if we don't have data that's actionable and we don't have data that's like clean, it's not going to help us.
Yeah.
And so it is in that sense just data best practices, right? Delete it every now and then if you're not going to use it. So, but it just codifies it a bit more. Obviously, there's more to it. So then, if you're going to collect medical data, then obviously this is another level, right? It's sensitive. You need to be careful. It's very special data.
So it
and
also
then you need to say, how do I keep it secure, etc.
So it also sets some rules for certain data being more critical than others.
Yeah.
For example, I might give them the gender of my pet, and they can store it for whatever they want. But if I give them my medical conditions and say, hey, for example, I have asthma, I have whatever, chronic knee issues, whatever, they have to store it in a certain way and also are only allowed to use it for certain purposes.
I think it all depends on why you're collecting it, right? So I think the most important thing to remember about anything special, like in categories of data, so anything like sexual preferences, certain identifying biometric data, political affiliation, religions, those type of things. You need to get a different type of consent. You need to get what's called explicit consent. And again, yes, you need to have a clear purpose for it, for every data you collect, by the way. And you need to have a good retention period for it, and you need to store it. But you need to keep it just as secure as the other data. Yes, there are some specific things you should be doing, but because it's not prescriptive, the GDPR never says you need to encrypt it or you need to do this. It doesn't say that, right? It just says that you need to use the appropriate technical measures to keep it safe.
Okay.
So again, it in that sense, it's vague. And this is when it becomes hard for people, especially smaller businesses. Like, well, what do we mean? What do we do? There are a lot of tools to help you with this. Obviously, there are consultants to help you with this. But especially for smaller ventures, they're just like, what do I do with all this? I think someone working in data, it makes more sense. Right? Because even if you've never had to deal with data protection regulations of any sort, if you work with data, you know certain things. You know you need to keep it clean. You know you need to delete it every now and then. At least I hope, that you need to delete it every now and then. That you need to keep it accurate, that you need to be able to update it. These are all things you need to be able to do based off of the regulation as well.
So first important thing for me is that the regulation is not forbidding collecting data.
No.
It's just saying you have to have a purpose. For example, currently, we had the elections in the United States and we have elections in Germany and all that. And there are institutes conducting surveys. And they're conducting them. So, which party are you probably going to vote for if today was voting day? And for those data, for example, it might be interesting to say, hey, I am member of the party and I vote for that party. Obviously, that would be interesting. So they are allowed to collect this data and store it in a certain way because this is required for the outcome of the survey. So they have a reason to collect it.
Yeah, they have a reason to collect it. And in the end, they have to have what's called a legal basis. It's probably quite important. There are two important things. You have to have a purpose and you have to have a legal basis. And the legal basis are essentially specific categories as to how you can collect this data. And one of them being consent, which we all know from cookie pop-ups, but you can get it in various other ways, right? Somebody coming to your door asking you for a survey could say, do I have your consent to keep this data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can say yes, or you could sign something, right? So these are all ways to get consent. In America, an insurance company might call you and they'll say, do we have your consent to? And then you can give them consent. So it's not just online. And you can also do it for other reasons. You could have, the legitimate interests of the business, meaning you have a reason to process the data and you have balanced the risks to the person, the user whose data it is, versus your business benefits, for example. And if those balances are quite on par, meaning there is no major risk to the user, then for example, and you have a real clear reason to keep it, then you could do that, for example. There might be legal reasons you have to keep it. So there are different reasons you can collect data. There's nowhere where it says, to my knowledge, like you're not allowed to collect data. Like, I don't think that's the purpose. And it completely defeats the whole essence of having a digital Europe in that sense. So.
Because to some people, it seemed like that. Like, they're making all this and I have to sign. For example, for me, one example, you go to the doctor and you have to sign the consent that they transfer your data to their email provider to remind you of the upcoming appointments you have. And also, for example, my dentist, they have a company doing the billing for them. So that they say, okay, to send you the bills, we have to obviously transfer your data to our service provider, who then will send you the invoice. No. So they have business reasons.
There are business reasons, right? Yeah. But everyone's a little bit different. But some of those scenarios might not even require consent. Because in the end, when you think about it, if you're going to the dentist, you're expecting them to send you a bill. This is not something out of the blue.
I would love them to do it for free. Don't get me wrong. But that's not how dentists work.
Well, you could try it. I don't consent to you sending me the bill. Don't worry, you'll still get the bill. Because then there are different reasons that they can use. I think that a lot of people, if they're not sure, now default to consent.
Mm-hmm.
And
just to
I
be
know
sure.
that exactly, just to be sure, which I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a personal opinion. And I know that in the legal space, and amongst my colleagues, there are a lot of discussions about, certain case law and everything that has come out. And that, wait, are they all saying we just need to get consent all the time? Consent is the default, but I always tell everybody it's the last option you should go with. Because this is the last thing you want to do is have to ask for consent, because it's also the first thing anyone can say they can take it away.
Yeah.
You can give your dentist office consent, but you can call them the next day and be like, oh, no, I revoked that consent. I'm withdrawing that. And they have to. And then what do? So it's better off for them to do it based off of something else.
Yeah. So
right, like a contractual obligation or something like that.
But that's a really cool point. So that means that there are, in addition to consent, which probably everybody out there listening to this podcast has had at one point, like being handed over something to sign and say, okay, this is for the GDPR, or this is in German the Datenschutz thing. You have to sign this. They can handle your store. They can collect, store, transfer your data for other reasons without consent. And you as a business owner should also look into that do I really have to send my clients all these consent formulas and whatever? Because it might be better for the customer experience not to have it. Because apparently if they sign a contract with me, if they buy from me, I somehow have to invoice this. And there is a business reason. Yeah. And if my customer hands me their credit card data to whatever Stripe or whatever payment service you're using, apparently they want to pay for my service, and I don't have to ask them 5 times again, hey, are you really sure I want to that I can send you the bill? I would love not receiving bills for a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Hey, if billing was based off of consent, I would be stoked. So I'm just saying, like, nope, I don't give consent anywhere. Just give me your services. I think a lot of people think it's all about consent. And I think I forget that a lot of people think it's all about consent, because I work in a space, so it's easy for me to forget. And especially when you're a smaller company that doesn't have help to understand what you need to do. Then it's hard to forget. But there are various other reasons that you can process data in any type. I mean, to give you an example that's completely not related to billing is there are, for example, cases where you collect data and then you want to anonymize the data later on.
Yeah.
But guess what? Anonymizing that data or pseudonymizing it, for all, encrypting it, anything you want to do is a process that you need to have a purpose and a legal basis for it. So what are you going to go running back to the person and say, can I have your consent to pseudonymize your data? No, you're not going to do that, right? There are other reasons you can do this. So I think you just need to think about that a little bit in that sense.
So at the end of the day,
it's not all about consent.
So at the end of the day, the idea of the GDPR is not that everybody and all the small businesses hand out consent formulas to all the people there and store it in Germany in paper-based somewhere in the back. Sorry, I had to crack that one.
Talking about security there, huh?
But it's rather that the businesses and the people think about what they are doing with the data and have a good reason to do so, and not just do it for fun or some, as you said, shady practices.
Yeah,
but you can still work with the data and process it as as it is required for your special case.
Exactly. I mean, it's all context dependent, right? So it's all a case by case type of thing. But in my opinion, that's the essence of what the GDPR is trying to get to. And I think that yeah, it's gone a little overboard. But again, this is my personal opinion. There are a lot of people who disagree with me. There are a lot of people that think it's not done enough.
Okay.
And that's an opinion, right? I tend to have a little bit more of a business-friendly opinion, I think. As long as you're a business, that's okay. If you're a business that does shit, I'm like, nope, get out.
Yeah.
So,
but one thing that would be really interesting to me, I don't know if you can talk about it, what would be the shady tactics, the shady things with data they try to protect us from? Because maybe this is also important for the people to understand. So like, what can your data be used to? So like, because a lot of people say, when I had this discussion recently, was like, with data, it's like, with data protection, it's like, if you think that you have nothing to hide, well, then probably you're not thinking, or you don't know what people can use against you for what cases. Because totally legal things that are totally legal, might come back to haunt you at some point when people abuse the data. To give you one example, buying a box of beer is totally legal in Germany above the age of 16. And I can buy a box of beer every day. At some point, some health insurance might say, hey, Christian, we're going to increase your fees because you're drinking too much alcohol. Because I didn't do anything wrong there from a legal perspective. But if somebody has the information on how much beer I would consume, they might say, okay, boy, that's even for German standards a bit much.
Okay, so now that we know what Christian's problem is, and he buys a box of beer every evening,
Fun
the health
fact,
insurance is listening.
Yeah.
They've got the data now. You've given it to them. You've put it into the public sphere. It's not yours anymore.
Fun fact, I stopped drinking alcohol in April 2023. Totally.
I stopped drinking alcohol 2 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so that makes two of us.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, that's just an example.
Yeah.
Or as
it happens. I think that there are a lot of what we would think is innocent can turn to not so innocent. Or even what we can seem as beneficial can turn into something that ends up becoming a problem. In the States, they always use this classic example, the Target example, where Target collects a lot of data through your loyalty cards.
Yeah.
And that at some point, this girl who was living with her family, she was 16, got essentially, I think it was a bag of coupons or something like that for
diapers.
Stuff.
Yeah,
diapers and stuff. Yeah. And it turns out that Target realized she was pregnant before she was, based off of her shopping behavior. Now, none of the individual actions are a problem, right? It's a loyalty card holder. She's getting discounts, but they have so much data that they can essentially determine based off of behaviors what your next shopping behaviors will be. Meaning, what are your upcoming? They can predict what your next shops will be, and based off of that, they will send you coupons. In essence, that's all really great. But somebody forgot to think about the fact that maybe someone who's 16 can't be sent something like this, right? For her, the consequences were quite severe. So this is when it's one of those things where it's your responsibility to think ahead what could happen. So because any of these individual things are actually benefits of being in society right now that we really enjoy. We like the fact that we get from the supermarket the coupons that are relevant to us. But we do need to always weigh that against the risks of what could happen. And then if we do that, if we think ahead and say, oh, these are the risks, then we can mitigate for those. Then we can say, oh, okay, we need to do this so this doesn't happen. We need to check age. We need to make sure these things don't happen at this age, whatever it might be.
Yeah, if is underaged or not, maybe with 16 being pregnant in some areas isn't that much of a problem. In other areas, it is, especially if you are not married, because for some areas which are quite quite conservative.
Exactly.
If this happens to you, probably if this happens to you somewhere in Berlin, it's like okay, well, that happens. And okay.
Yeah.
But if you get pregnant in a quite conservative Christian environment in some states of the United States, you are into some cultural issues with your family and your surroundings because it's not a thing that usually happens there.
Yeah. And I would say even it's, especially if you're trying to understand the risk impact there, I think even in Berlin, you've got so many different types of households. We've got so many different cultures that, especially there, so many different cultures, and each one of those households have different expectations. So you need to weigh these things. And, the same goes for online, profiling that we do, right? So what do all the, ad tech companies or Facebook, et cetera, do? They essentially collect all your data and create a profile on you. And that's fine. Most people are okay with that. Some people aren't. But what if that goes wrong? What if you're being targeted? My husband always jokes, they're targeting me with engagement rings. Like, if you weren't Siobhan, then you would be upset that I have a mistress somewhere that I'm buying jewelry for. And he's got a point. Like,
totally.
That could happen. And it's, they're showing him engagement rings because he's looked at jewelry, and that can be misconstrued. So that's an innocent example. And in today's day and age, we can sort of be okay with that. But there are a lot of scenarios where this could happen. And then obviously there's the whole security aspect of things. Nowadays, you're going to get breached at some point. And then you need to think about what the consequences of that are. Right? And the more data that you have on someone, the more of a profile you have on someone, the more special categories of data you have or sensitive data you have on someone, that breach is going to become a bigger problem. And if that gets out, you have a serious problem. So it also it ties together with security, right? I mean, we all know security is hard, and like cybersecurity is a whole nother aspect of this. And data security is also mandated in the GDPR. So you need to keep it secure. But what if someone gets their hands on that data? Or what if someone in your organization decides to get their hands on that data? So you need to think it through. And there is always going to be a risk that the business is willing to take.
Yeah.
Right? And if that risk is not going to have a huge impact on the person's data, then great. That's a risk. That's a decision they make as a business.
Yeah. So for example,
as long as they document it and they figure it out, then they're good. And you can't eliminate all risks. You can't be 100% compliant. This doesn't exist, right? It's the constantly moving field.
So I mean, security.
But you just have to have thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, security adds a whole different level to that, because coming from the recommendation systems, I mean, there you also have the issue of the how do you call it, double-edged sword of personalized advertisements. On the one hand, we want them because I don't want to see advertisements which are irrelevant to me. On the other side, people can nudge you into buying stuff that you usually wouldn't buy. Which is the one thing, but adding, as you said, adding security on top of it, because as you said, so breach means that the data is lost or accessed by somebody who should not have access to it, or stolen. I think we have heard cases of that. Just have to Google it, latest security breaches, then you have a ton of it.
I mean, they're everywhere, right? But it's, and then you have to think about that. Like, I mean, people, especially I think in the privacy and data protection field, people forget about data security, or they don't talk about it as much, but I think it's really, really important. And that's why it's so important for someone like me to work with the cybersecurity team or the CISO of a company, because there is no way that should be two different functions, right? I mean, cybersecurity is a broader subject because they look at everything in terms of security.
Yeah.
Not just personal data, which is the general, the GDPR, but ultimately they also look at that.
Yeah.
And if there is a breach in regards to like personal data, it's also a cybersecurity problem. So, there's a reason for us to have to like think about it together. But there are just so many scenarios where it can go wrong. And people, I think it's easy to pick on the kids' situations or the teenagers, 16-year-olds on Facebook are being targeted the wrong thing. But even if you're 25 and let's say you have an eating disorder, right? and you're typing in weight loss everywhere, and they're profiling you, and they know that you're like into this weight loss thing, and then they start giving you ads all about weight loss supplements and stuff. This is something that medically is really dangerous for you.
Yeah,
because if you were to then respond to that and you already have an eating disorder, it makes it worse. So you don't have to be just a child to be sensitive to that. And there are so many examples. You can look them up everywhere.
And there is, and just as you said, not only kids, there is one whole industry which puts data security to a different level. I mean, if some, as you said, if for grocery stores, if your recommendations come out, they say, okay, hey, Siobhan is shopping is shopping that kind of laundry, or is shopping your food preferences. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But there is an industry called adult industry, which is happening online. So if those data gets leaked, and it's connected to, hey, the CEO of company XYZ loves watching these movies.
Yeah, I mean, this was the whole Ashley Madison problem, right? When the Ashley Madison breach happened. I mean, we all know what the consequences. It was all over the news. The porn industry in general, it's really sensitive information, especially because you can also determine sexual preferences, right? That people might not want to have anyone know about.
Yeah.
When it comes to kind of internet and everything, they tend to be a little bit ahead of the game. The whole adult entertainment industry.
So we can learn a lot from them. For other businesses,
we used to be able to learn a lot from them. Yeah, I'm not so much into. I don't know anyone that works in it anymore. So I used to know a lot of people that worked in it, so I've learned a lot because they really were always just a step ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in regards to security and data protection. I'd love to know if anyone here listening works in the adult entertainment industry. Reach out to me so that I can learn from you.
Maybe
it's just intriguing to me, right? Because it used to be, especially at the beginning of the internet, they used to always be ahead of everything, and they have such a huge user base that you can learn a lot from them.
At this point, I have to recommend a different podcast.
Oh,
it's called Unexpected Data by Yudan Lin. I will have a talk with her soon, and she did a lot of data in that field. She was really working in data in that field, so I recommend listening to the podcast. She has had some episodes back then about the data in there and how to deal with the data in a very sensible and sensitive way.
Okay. Nice.
And yes, I recommend a different podcast in my podcast, but sue me.
No, this is interesting. I'm definitely going to check it out because this is a space that I used to be very involved with, and I'm not anymore, so it'll be intriguing to hear about it.
But yes, again, I think this is a beautiful example for things not being illegal. And you say, okay, I have nothing to hide. And then, okay, sure. Are you sure you have nothing to hide and nothing to be protected? I mean, what if for example, your husband or your wife finds out which videos you're watching? Would you be ashamed? I mean, if you're not, hey, everything's fine, huh? But as you said, there are areas, cultural areas where some sexual orientations are discriminated against still in 2024. And then this might turn into a problem if those people are handling your data in a shady way.
Yeah. And I mean, if you have nothing to hide, that's okay. And that's great. If you're that comfortable in your own skin that you have nothing to hide, good on you. But there are so many people that do, for various reasons, if it's by choice, if it's because of cultural reasons, because the consequences behind it. And you need to respect that they have that. So, I say I have nothing to hide, but I still respect that Christian might have something to hide. Like his beer habit that he hasn't had since 2023.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to stick. But yeah, I mean, really, as I said, the thing is, if you think ahead, I think the people who say that we should have nothing to hide haven't seen enough dystopian movies.
Now you can recommend all the dystopian movies you want. Get everyone really scared.
Start with 1984.
A good classic.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, just because your data is legal and you're fine within your cultural area. In the age of the internet, imagine you're doing something which is, whatever which is perceived differently in a different cultural surrounding. And then you're a business person moving or trying to expand to a different cultural surrounding with your company, and this data comes up. Because, as I said, drinking alcohol in Germany is totally fine. No, if you walk around with your beer, there's nothing wrong with that. There are countries where you are put to jail for that.
Yeah.
And
it's an extreme. And I mean, I know a few personal stories that happened to people quite close to me who didn't get, promotions and jobs just based off of opinions that came out.
Yeah.
So we have to also remember that we live in an extremely judgmental world. And it doesn't just have to be information that is necessarily considered wrong culturally in some places. Having said that, I don't think people need to be scared either.
No.
I think it's just a wake-up call to say, let's have some respect. And for me, it always comes down to respect. I mean, just have respect for each other and the world we live on, and then we should be okay, right? And then if you think about it that way, then yes, we can argue the EU overregulates. We can argue that America might be better for innovation, etc. But ultimately, if we can just learn to have that respect, then at least we're heading in the right direction. And then the regulations might not be so hard to be abided by. To abide with the regulations might not be so hard.
Yeah. And this would be a beautiful end note. But I wholeheartedly agree that if we treat each other and each other's data with more respect, then the world would be a better place. And also, that for me, as you said, the wake-up call, not only to be sensitive to that data, but also to realize that this is an asset. It's valuable and it's your data. And for me, always, if you click consent, or as it's still often done, or if you have to provide a certain information to someone to receive a service or an offer, you have to or should treat this as an asset. Like, would I pay? Because they can monetize your data. And at the end of the day, if you wouldn't give them some euros for it, probably you shouldn't give them the data also.
Yeah.
But recently you made one post which stuck to me, and I said, like, in some parts I have to disagree.
Oh no, I'm nervous now.
No, you don't have to be. You made one post in the essential saying that customers will shy away from companies with shady data practices, and that it's becoming a competitive edge.
Okay, I don't like the word competitive edge, but yes, got it. I know what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. And then
what do you disagree with?
I agree that in B2B, this is totally important.
Okay.
And then I stumbled upon a website which is selling you AI generated pictures of yourself. I'm not gonna link them here. I'm not gonna tell you whose company this is. I want to keep the names out. Because then you look at the FAQ and they say, okay, of course, apparently for us data people, this is quite easily understandable, that to train a model which creates AI pictures of Christian, I need to upload some pictures of Christian. If Siobhan wants some pictures AI generated of Siobhan in a beautiful dress, in whatever, we need to upload pictures of Siobhan. So we need some consent. And then I read the FAQ, and then it says data protection and AI regulation. What happens to my reference pictures? And then I fell from the chair laughing. It's like, with your Auftrag, I have to translate this in my head. In
contract.
German. With your contract, you confirm the usage of your reference pictures for training reasons of the AI. We store these securely. They don't state how, but they store it securely. We don't know what our AI supplier does with your data.
That's what they said.
It's like in Germany it says it's like it was like, okay, this FAQ just disproves Siobhan's post. I'm sorry, I have to disagree because people buy this shit. Sorry. Like, we are handing your pictures to some AI vendor and they do God Lord knows what to it. It's like, okay, so sorry. I'm sorry that this disproved your. If this flies, it disproves your post. I'm sorry.
Okay, if it flies, it does. But I'll guarantee you that's not going to fly. I mean, if they're a European company, or at least within the scope, they have to have at least assessed their supplier. Yeah. So I think it's quite amusing that they write that there. That has to be a typo. Like, it's like, we keep it securely and... No, they keep it securely, everyone says, but the next part not.
I can give you the full German quote is, diese werden von uns sicher aufbewahrt. Allerdings übernehmen wir keine Haftung für das, was auf Seiten des KI-Dienstleisters passiert.
But okay, that translates slightly different, doesn't it? Because they're not taking any responsibility for anything that's happening by their... exactly.
Yeah. And thereby, they're not even stating the AI supplier.
Oh, no, they should probably state that. But whatever.
It isn't. But yeah. So yeah, basically they say they don't have a clue what the AI supplier is.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Yeah, no, you're right. Like, okay, so the idea behind it. Wait, let me rephrase that. Sorry, everyone listening. Sometimes I stumble over my words and I don't know what I'm trying to say and my mind goes blank.
The listeners are used to my stumbling, so don't worry.
Good. So the stat comes from a report, so I didn't make the stat up, right? Yeah. And I do have to say that a lot of times when I see these statistics, and there are a lot of them out there, that you wonder, like, if that's really true, then why do so many people get away with things? And there's a very clear thing here. I mean, people call this the privacy paradox a lot, but it's just a lot of times I think that there is a difference between what people say and what people do.
Yes.
And
I agree.
It's one of those things. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, even I give consent half the time. Without thinking, by the way. Yeah. I'm fully admitting that. Like, there are times when I'm like, no, I just need this information. Sure, accept. Just give me what I need.
Yeah.
And we all know what I believe. But it doesn't mean that my actions don't necessarily align with that. So I think it's very hard nowadays to actually do what you believe. So you could be truly thinking like, I don't want to buy from this store because I know that they sell my data and they're constantly going to target me left and right. But the truth is, if that's the only store that's going to have the type of laundry detergent you like, you're going to go there and get it because you don't have a choice. So yes, I think that a lot of I think the statistic is probably correct for what people believe. I'm not 100% sure that these statistics are necessarily correct with what people act on. And that's harder to measure. You know this, right? Like, we can only measure what people tell us. Like, measuring actions is a lot harder.
Yeah, I think this one is called customer-citizen gap.
Yeah.
Which has been a lot explored when it comes to food. When they say how, I think there's some surveys have been conducted on like, or where people are asked for how much do you care about animal handling and that the animals are treated well, and how important is that to you, and would you be willing to pay more money if the animals, which I mean it's for dairy products or meat products, and they're the so-called the citizens say it's totally important and of course I would pay more. The customers, when you look at the sales figures, it's the price. It's just solely decided in the price in large parts. Yeah. And so I think probably we have the same consumer citizen gap in data protection.
Yeah, 100%. I would say. I think that everyone likes the idea. It doesn't necessarily translate. there are always people that do, I mean, there are plenty of people that also buy the foods that they believe are correct.
Absolutely.
And there are people who live by it. But I think this is part of the reason why this GDPR thing is a tricky one, right? And the e-privacy directive is like all these consent banners, all these things that you're expecting businesses to do. And businesses are realizing they can just get away with not doing it half the time. And then enforcement is really lacking, right? So there aren't really any consequences. And I think this is what's so hard for me, because I always say, I believe in the spirit of it, because I just want people to respect each other.
Yeah.
And so I wish people could just see it that way, but that's not what it's about all the time, right? And I mean, it's like, me saying, I want people to respect it. It's like, but we used to say, we want world peace, right? I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Peace on Earth. I sound like a teenager. It's like, I want world peace. But it just doesn't work that way. And I think as long as businesses realize that they can get away with it, and as long as there aren't any consequences to it, they are going to. But it is also extremely hopeful to see and really exciting to see that there are a lot of companies and a lot of smaller companies, startups, scale-ups that are really putting the good behind things, who are starting to understand how we can still have a lot of these benefits while preserving how the data is processed and preserving someone's privacy or protecting the data better. And I think that's really nice to see. And I think slowly that will all shift. But these things just take time. And hopefully at some point there will be some good reports out there that show what really is being done and what people are thinking. And then we can see how that gap might be closing. Because I think in some industries, the gap is closing.
I totally agree.
And I would like to see that being measured in the data protection field so that we can see if that gap is closing. Because if that gap is not closing, then we can understand that we're doing something really fundamentally wrong with how we're trying to enforce it. And that would allow us to look at the way things are being regulated and see, like, how can we do this differently? Because clearly we're not making that point, or it's not important to people. But if we don't see that gap closing, we can fix for it and adjust. But if we're not measuring that, then we can't. Now, I have not found that stat anywhere. If anyone has, please find me and send it to me. That's the second favor I've now asked of your listeners.
It's fine.
But yeah, I would love to be able to see that.
Yeah, but that in essence is, for me, always the backbone of working with data. Like, set your targets, look at the measures you need to, and the data you need to assess to measure your progress towards the goal or away from the goal, and then make adjustments on your journey. Yeah, so it's at the end of the day, data protection is should be done in a data-driven way. So perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Closes the circle.
It closes the circle completely. It's like, measure it so you can action on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but if you don't measure it, then you can't action on it. You can't make a decision on it. I'm not saying that every decision has to be, and your data needs to be accurate or reliable to be able to do that. That's another, little problem we have. But it needs to aid in your decision making. It's a feedback loop. It's essentially a feedback loop that is just in numbers. And in a lot of cases, that's just a lot more reliable than what people are actually saying.
Yeah. Perfect. Siobhan, I think we're leaving on a high note. So and an optimistic outlook. And just I don't have much to add. Just really again to the audience and all the people out there, be a bit more careful about the data that you are handling, and also about who you are handing over your data to. And if you're working with data, treat the data of other people, especially the data of other people, but also other companies, with respect, and always think about the outcomes of your actions ahead. What could go wrong for you and for the others? So this would be a great thing to achieve with data. But dear Siobhan, I can't let you go without two small questions for our wrap-up round, which is a small ritual in this podcast.
Damn, I didn't prepare enough.
Yeah.
Let's go.
You have. They're quite easy. So the first question, just so that the listeners out there get to know you a little better, what was the last song running on repeat in your head? And we had a brief discussion about your music.
You're gonna ask me that now.
You're quite diverse. No, everybody has to answer that question because, interestingly, this is why before the recording we had a brief talk about music. So I have some ideas about your musical preferences.
The last song that was running around my head, well, it was due to the fact that we had this conversation. So it's very influenced by Christian, just saying. Mutter by Rammstein.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, don't ask me why that one, because we didn't talk about that one. It should have been
we didn't talk about that
right?
one. It's actually one of my least favorite albums and songs from Rammstein, interestingly.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites either, but it's what's stuck in my head.
For Rammstein, I would have expected it. I would have expected Rammstein now because of our conversation, but I would have expected a different song.
Yeah, it's quite funny because you said Enge, and I was like, okay, and then that came to my head. Yeah. I'm like, why? Why that one? I don't even like it. Like, give me something good.
Yeah.
You know, like, head, work with me. Yeah. You have the whole Rammstein repertoire in your head. Yeah. Give me something good, and you come up with Mutter. What can I do?
Maybe it's
just like the fireworks that went off during that song might have been exceptionally great or something. Okay. Who knows?
And the second one is rather a request. So asking you a small favor now. Yeah. And then a question. Could you kindly recommend a book to us, to me, the audience, which we should absolutely read with just very, very small restrictions? One being not a book that you authored or co-authored, and no literature from the adult entertainment industry, please.
Ah, damn. Well, there goes everything. No, I'm kidding.
But apart from that, it's about data. It can be about data. It can be a crimi, a graphic novel, a children book. We had it all. Just everything.
Okay, my favorite book of all times is Pippi Langstrumpf, to be fair, because I read it in German.
Oh, but Pippi Longstocking, Astrid Lindgren.
Yeah, she's definitely my favorite of all times. And because of that book, I still sleep with my feet uncovered at all times. Don't ask. You have to read the book to understand.
Okay.
But no, the book I would probably recommend for everyone to read right now that is, I think, made an impact.
It's fine. It's Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, let's go with Pippi Longstocking. Yeah, good. I don't need to sound fancy and intellectual. I love Pippi Longstocking. So
perfect. And now we even know something about your sleeping habits.
But do you know that in Greece, they don't call her Pippi Longstocking? They call her girl with the freckled nose.
That's interesting.
They completely lost it in their translation.
Wow. That's interesting. So no socks there. And no stockings in.
Yeah, so it's the only book I have read in Greek, English, and German. And French.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So if that isn't a recommendation, I don't know what is. Siobhan, thanks again for your time and the awesome conversation. And of course, also thanks to our fellow listeners for tuning in today. And as usual, this is the moment where I kindly ask you to hit the subscribe, follow, or whatever button where you're listening your podcast now to follow this show. This would mean the world to me. And yeah, of course, who doesn't follow me on LinkedIn? Kindly do so now. Siobhan is also on LinkedIn. Go there, click the follow button. And when you're done listening to this episode, she also has the podcast Marketing Unfucked. So give it a spin at your player. And that's it for today. I'm looking forward to seeing you around next time. Have a great one.